Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are live, but I wanted to start again because I had a little internet glitch. really nice.
Thank you.
I love how you play, and I probably, if I lived near you, I'd be going to see you all the time.
That would be great. It's funny how California is just spread out just enough where you're like, okay, I think I can make that gig in LA, and like, and then, well, maybe the 3 hours there is too much, or with us here in San Diego, like Tijuana is really close, but then you have to deal with the border thing. So going over to see friends play can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. Or
Are friends playing in Tijuana?
oh yeah, there's a really nice scene in Tijuana right now, and a really nice scene in Ensenada as well.
Really?
Not as many gigs as in Ensenada, but there's a nice scene. There's a bunch of really great players down there, and there was a little thing happening in Tecate, and I don't think that's going on anymore. So these things sprout up, and then same thing. There's I see gigs happening all the time in Yuma. Of course, Phoenix is
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
I was in Phoenix for 2 years, and it's really nice stuff out there. Everybody's working. It's
Oh,
actually kind of similar to San Diego. It's definitely a working musicians town. A lot of people out there doing
oh,
gigs.
that's nice.
Yeah,
My friend moved to Nashville, and they're actually now thinking of moving to Phoenix.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if you could put up with the heat,
Oh, yeah.
that's that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, especially in the summer, right? That's like really bad, kind of like Palm Springs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We moved out there. I mean, me and my wife grew up here. We both grew up in Encinitas, like right by the beach. So,
Uh,
and we moved out there in May, and it was like, "Ooh, what have we done?" We had no idea what we were getting into. Yeah.
How long were you there?
Just for 2 years. Yeah, my wife got a job out there. We had two young children, and we thought, maybe a change that might be fun. So we moved out there, and uh, it was great actually. Because for me, I was just like early 30s, and I'd been working in San Diego, and I had these connections up the coast, a little bit of connections in Mexico and stuff. But I wasn't really going out a lot. I wasn't really like challenging myself to meet new people. So, and I was dropped into this town where I knew nobody. Joey Sellers sent me an email and said, "Hey, go find this guy." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So I sent an email to that guy, and he never responded. So I just kind of hit the ground running, and started doing searches and going out and trying to find spots. And I went and met Dom Moyo, who's sort of the drum um, king of Phoenix, and a great educator and amazing drummer. And then made it down to these different clubs and met Keith Kelly, who's still a good friend today, and met Ted Sistrunk, who runs a band called Jiggle. Played with Jiggle a little bit. So it was really good. It just sort of forced me to actually um, get out, and I think we all get to that point at some point in our lives. We're like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay in tonight. I don't need to go see that concert. And it just really made me like, okay, no, I have. And actually, my wife was actually really nice about it, because normally you're in a situation, you have kids, and they're like, "You're going out again," and she was like, "No, you really should go to that jam session." I was like, "I don't want to. I want to stay home." So that was a nice moment. Allowed me to kind of um, just make some new connections, and then also just push me to really like keep going out and finding those things.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's just you have to do that. And I mean, aside from going out and hearing people, it's just I mean, you do have to go out and get involved with the community. It's just
Oh yeah, at all times, and it keeps happening. It's really interesting. The
yeah.
newer generations show up, and meeting these people, making connections with people, maybe. Um, and then a similar thing happened when we came back to San Diego. So we were there for 2 years, came back,
Oh,
and I
really?
realized like, there's a bunch of people in this town that I've known for decades and I've never played with. Why have I never played with this person? Or like you start wondering about those things. So I really made a conscious effort to try and be like, okay, I would love to play with this, whoever it was,
Yeah.
trying to like make those things happen. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and there's
Yeah.
clicks, or there's just
Yeah.
not clicks, but people work together because they like each other, and
Yeah.
they're gonna work with the similar people and stuff, and I get that. But for me it was a nice opportunity to say, oh hey, we've known each other. I mean, whoever it was, we've known each other for years. I've been watching you play. You've seen me play. Like, why have we never done a gig? Let's try and make that happen. So,
Yeah. I'm still intrigued with Mexico having these gigs. I mean,
oh
like
yeah.
the gig we just saw you play was stuff like that?
There's actually a nice, there's a straight ahead scene and sort of a Latin jazz scene in Tijuana. A lot of the stuff there, I'm not sure in Ensenada, there was a Sunday jam session happening. And actually, when I came back from Phoenix, my friend, well, I have a couple friends there, Adnan Marquez, who went to San Diego State, and I worked with, he was down there and he hit me up and said, hey, we're doing this festival and you should come down and play. And it was more experimental avant-garde
Nice.
stuff. And this guy, Avant Trujillo, is a great trumpet player. He had uh, I think he was just trying to figure out how to make something happen. So he had rented this space they called La Covacha, and
Uh-huh.
it was just a little room, um, a couple blocks down from Husong's, sort of in the main part of the town. And so I went down there and played with all these people that I'd never met, and it was great. And okay, I didn't know any of this
I
was
would
happening.
have imagined like an avant-garde, but I
Well,
would never imagine that in
I mean, you
wow,
know, the first
interesting.
couple times I went down there, there wasn't much of an audience, and they built it up to the
Oh,
point now where, you know, there's a packed room, and they've gone on to bigger venues and stuff, and they're
wow.
able to present these things. So that's great. And then all those people are also playing straight ahead jazz. They're playing Latin jazz. They're playing
Yeah.
orchestral music and stuff. There's a big band based out of the university there
Hmm.
that does. It seems like most of that book is kind of bassy. It's more in that vibe
Yeah.
of a traditional big band. So there's lots of different interests and all sorts of different people doing all these things, and that branches out because you see there's a connection between Ensenada and Tijuana,
Yeah.
and then also some of those people come across and play, and it it got a little tricky during COVID, but I've tried to have people come over. For many years, I've run a large ensemble, sort of in the vein of the Vinigoli, a large ensemble or something.
Yeah.
So, and I've gotten to bring a few of them across and feature them in that group. Um, so there's like a nice, healthy ecosystem, I guess. And also, Wilfredo Terraza is now at UC State, who's a great flute player. So
Hmm.
he's teaching up here. So there's these connections,
Oh,
and so there's all sorts of these things happening, which is really nice to see.
that's so nice. I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me feel good, you know, to and I'm so surprised. I guess I'm very naive or about that. Never really spent time down there, and very little time in San Diego. But
I
um,
don't think it gets enough like attention,
yeah,
but I mean, in general, I think when you cross the border, there's a lot of things. I mean, I didn't even realize what a really big scene is happening in Mexico City. And for a lot of people, you know, like in the States especially, and this was true in Arizona especially, everybody's like, I got to get out of here. I got to go to New York, right?
yeah,
That's kind of the jazz cliche.
yeah.
And in Mexico, it's, I got to go to Mexico City.
Oh.
So that was really interesting. And there's like a nice scene happening down there. Um,
Do
so
you
it's a nice,
not to kind of bring a downer into it, but I'm just curious. Most of what I hear, or what I've heard over the years, I guess, I mean, besides certain friends going to certain cities and just having a really beautiful, great, gorgeous time, but
yeah.
I've also heard danger, like Mexico City, especially, and
I, I
Tijuana.
think, yeah, Tijuana definitely has a sort of just reputation for being dangerous, being a border town. It's that border crossing is the biggest border crossing in the world, and you can get stuck and you can spend 4 hours sitting there trying to get across. I
Uh,
mean, Stuart Liebing and I have done it where we actually got across in 20 minutes and we were like high fiving each other. We did it! I can't believe it was that quick. Um, so there's definitely issues, and there's been times where we went down once where there was a bunch of protests about gas issues, and there was a shortage of gas. And there was one point where the cartels were setting cars on fire. So that was kind of a dangerous situation. But in general, I've been going down there since I was a teenager, and I very rarely had any issues. I pulled over once coming back from a gig where I took um, I didn't even think about it, but taking a right-hand turn on a red, using it as a
Oh,
stop, just like
yes.
normal California thing, and I don't even know if that's legal. And he pulled me over, and I don't speak much Spanish, and
Yeah.
at some point he just kind of let me go. I don't know if this was a shakedown. Of course, in the '80s, you hear about the shakedown where everybody has,
Yeah.
you're passing off money to the. So in general, I haven't really had any problems going to Ensenada or going to Tecate. Sorry, going to Tijuana. Um, it got to the point. Stuart Lieberg and I did have done Ensenada uh, 5 or 6 times, and we started going down through Tecate and going down through the valley, which is kind of an interesting drive, different sites. So there's two different ways to get down there, and I've never had any issues going either way.
Cool.
Fingers crossed, of course. I mean, clearly, any city there's danger. In San Diego,
Sure,
there's
sure.
parts where I would shy away from, and
Yeah,
same thing
yeah.
in LA. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in Oakland where there's been some kind of sketchy situations, but
I'm from
uh,
Boston. There's definitely sketchy Boston.
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I've been to Boston twice, and I know enough that I should not be driving in Boston.
Yeah, that. I don't know what it comes back to me like that. It's like, oh yeah, my husband's like, what the hell is going on here?
Where are we?
From
Yeah,
California.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's, sometimes I talk about this with friends my own age, especially women. And like we talk about when we were in our 20s and where we were, and we
yeah,
were
yeah.
adventurous and we were singers and we
Oh
were
yeah,
in the middle of life, and you can actually think, wow, I'm really impressed that I'm still alive, and and then you can think, well, I was really lucky, or I have some faith in the way that I think and I create my reality. So
sure, sure.
yeah, and you go everywhere in the world. There's, I've been to Japan a lot. If you walk into certain restaurants or clubs, that's not a good idea,
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then, but I mean, that's like this much of Japan for me, So
yeah.
yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, either stay home or live.
Yeah, yeah. I've been trying to figure. I have young children, so I've been trying to figure out how to talk to them without scaring them about the world. Talking to them honestly, like, okay, my youngest especially is just he'll go up and talk to anybody, and that's really wonderful, right? Especially at
Yeah.
that age, is they want to see the world, they want to meet people and stuff. And at the same time, I'm like, let's talk about this a little bit. Some sort of balance between like everything's great, and then also you know, like you said, just
It's
staying
hard,
home.
yeah.
Yeah,
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 I have four grandchildren and their mothers, very good parents, and
yeah.
the two oldest are around 11 and the two oldest are around 7. And I see my stepdaughters, really working hard and thinking about that. They want them to be smart
Yeah,
and they don't want to shut them down, and but they also want them to be cautious,
yeah,
and
and aware. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, especially, and one of my son-in-laws, he'd probably kill somebody if if they fucked with his one of his
yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, and the world is so changing now, and um, it's it's interesting. Do you feel like do you feel like let's see, I'm not sure of my question. Do you feel like what you're doing, like music and art, is uh, has a major role in forming what the world is moving towards?
Ooh, that's an I would hope so. I mean, I see like the way we connect as musicians, I think, is how I would like society to work, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, we've talked a little bit via email, we know each other's backgrounds and stuff, and we can sit down and have a nice conversation for a lot of things. And that happens on the bandstand too. There's plenty of times you meet someone. I played with Wayne Pete the other week, and I've known Wayne for years, and I don't think I've ever done a gig with him. And we played a 50-minute set, completely improvised. That was great. We both respect each other, and these things happen.
Yeah.
And it's like any conversation. Sometimes you trails
Yeah.
off, or something happens, or you find something you don't agree about, or whatever. But those models, I think, are important to me, definitely, to get through, rather than just. I mean, the post-COVID thing's really interesting. I've been driving a lot, teaching a lot, and I noticed there's just a lot of angry people out there, especially on the road. People just mad, just cutting people off, people going around people for no reason, just really just, I'm gonna get ahead. And I understand that, especially in this era of, inflation's insane, and but just trying to get ahead is impossible. So, but I would hope that, like, that idea of community and communication, those things, like, can build us towards something better. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think the anger, it's interesting. Actually, yesterday I had knee surgery, and so
Yep.
for really up until this week, I was not at 100% of my normal thinking and awareness. And I mean, I was working and doing stuff, but it was interesting. It was very kind of slow, taking it slow. During the pandemic, I started the show.
Yeah.
So that was a focus for me and something that I could do. But yesterday, I noticed or yesterday and the day before, I kind of got back into this, I hate to say it, frenetic kind of, because I'm one of those people, like, something comes to my attention and I take care of it right away,
Yeah. Yeah.
try. And there's just a bunch of things. So I found myself kind of angry yesterday. And it was interesting. I thought, wow, okay, so am I angry because I'm not relaxed anymore? Like, all of a sudden the old stuff is here again, like I'm back to my la 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 la, and
You're talking the kind of pre-pandemic, like, just normal, like, craziness of life, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
know, I
Yeah, I feel
think
that.
I think a lot of people are experiencing that. I think that's why people are pissed off. And, unfortunately, I have to say, not enough people are aware enough to actually go, oh, I'm not feeling good. I wonder why. Oh, it's probably this. I think I should change that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, but I'm going to change it. Definitely. I'm, I'm definitely not going to whip myself into, the action that I had before, although people will probably won't believe that, but
I keep telling myself that, and I'm not. It's not working, but I'm trying, to find that balance, and
yeah,
because we jump back into this, and um,
sounds like
uh,
you're really busy too.
I've been teaching a little bit more. I've been teaching way more than I've ever done in my life, so that's been busy, and trying to find that balance, as opposed to, I mean, and like, I felt COVID was really challenging in a lot of ways, just to try and figure out, okay, what am I doing? These larger, like, what am I doing with my life? Am I really going to sit here, and is my industry completely over? I was, we did, right before the shutdown, I was doing a show, and we did one tech run, and we were supposed to do an invited audience that night, the night that it got shut down. And I literally drove over to the theater and put my drums in my car and was like, okay, hopefully, at that point, everybody was talking about, we'll take 2 weeks off. It was the week before spring break for my kids, and like, okay, well, hopefully we'll see each other in 2 weeks. And then, of course, a year later, we're still. So there's all those challenges, and the farther you get into that, you kind of get in this rigmarole of.
Yeah, yeah,
And then to come out of that and then be busier than ever, trying to keep something of what we learned. Because for me, what I learned is that, um, like, I work in certain ways, and I got a lot accomplished just being able to sit here. This room right here is sort of my recording room, and I was able to do a bunch of work with it, and I made I have a ton of percussion instruments, so I was sampling those and I was writing music and doing all this stuff. So how do I keep all of that going, which I felt was positive, and then also jumping back into like the normal like rat race of like, oh, I just need to pay my bills and all of that. So
Yeah.
that's been a challenge in like how to, yeah, like I keep saying, balance.
Yeah,
I don't really
balance.
have the answer.
No, balance is it. It's all about balance, really.
Yeah,
In with various aspects, depending on you and your life, but balance is it, man.
definitely.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yep, I won't go into my whole spiel, but I need to catch up on certain things. I need to get into recording at home and um, yeah, and I got to get into that now, and so that means slowing down in other areas. I think
Yeah,
for me, I don't know if you spend any time on PR, but for me, PR, which is interesting, my PR, I I talk about this every day, I think, with somebody,
yeah,
PR, because it just drives me crazy. But I think that for me, I've always done PR, like for the last 45 years. And so it makes people think I'm really busy, and maybe I am really busy, but I'm busiest with the PR. And then I do all this PR, and I don't feel like I was just talking with Will Salmon yesterday about this. We were talking about you PR and then nobody shows up. And it's just like it's kind of mind blowing because you put a lot of
yeah,
creative energy into it and you want to believe in it.
yeah.
Do you do much PR for your
I
gigs?
I hate it. Yeah, gigs and releases. Vinny Golia calls it the great silence, right? You send out all this stuff into the
That's
ether,
great.
and now we wait. um, so yeah, that's I I love creating, and I have a really hard in terms of gig PR. That's
Yeah.
a really challenge, and then release PR is the worst because I can't. I have a really hard time writing about myself, and saying something meaningful and trying to disseminate like what it is I've done. So and because people need some sort of understanding, you can't just send them. I mean, my friend Curtis Glatter and I made this record, and it's all electronics, and it kind of references music concrete and these different things, but you can't just hand somebody a CD and they're just gonna, oh yeah, this is great, I get it. No, but if you put some background there, you present it in the right situation,
Yeah.
that's gonna work great, and people will sort of open the door for them. I'm not good at that. So, and what I was, as you're talking, I was thinking this, that like, I think COVID taught us that we don't, well, it taught us that we do have to be all of those things. And it showed me what I'm saying is like, are we our own recording engineer, our own producer, our own like co-songwriter, our own manager, our graphic designer? We can go on and on, right? PR
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
street team, all of
Yep.
these different things. And at some point I realized like I'm just not good at these things. I can't do this all myself. I need to figure out what um, what works for me, and then the other things how to like fix those. So
Well,
have somebody else
one
do it or
thing
something.
is, one thing you can delegate
Oh
to
yeah, definitely.
people who are better at it,
Yeah,
because I realize I'm good at what I'm good at, you know, and I use that company Indeed. I have a social media person who takes care of mostly like posting to Instagram and TikTok, but she
yes,
just posts what I send.
yeah,
So she doesn't create. So, um, and then my friend was here from Australia for a few weeks. Really great singer, great teacher, very, very good. And she was, man, she was on Instagram all the time. I can't do it. I don't have the bandwidth. I can
yeah,
do it occasionally, but and then, like you say, I want to be creative. I want to actually have some time where I just go, I'm not doing anything else, and I'm just getting creative. And I want to do that a lot these days.
oh yeah.
Really want
And
to do that.
And I think it's these things take time. So these
Yeah.
have putting out a little snippet every day, or these different little content creators. Um, that's a challenge because I've been working on we can use a bunch of examples. Some of the stuff's been in the works for years, and clearly I take some
Yeah.
time off and I come back, but I need that time to figure out what it is and figure out how to make it better, or how exact. Sometimes I don't even know what it is. I'm working on something. I'm like, put it aside, come back and realize, oh, okay. And that goes with that. I'm one of those people. So that makes sense to me. But doing the daily or the weekly thing is really a challenge. Um, but you would, to keep an audience, or like trying to build an audience, keeping like doing that on that level. uh, Clearly, that's what's needed. If you want to build up something like
Also,
that.
and also, when I was younger, I had a girlfriend who was a great singer, one of the best jazz singers I've ever heard. She passed away a number of years ago, but she and I were, at that point, we were very young, and I felt like we were kind of equals.
Yeah.
Although later I felt like she's just kind of fabulous. But anyway, at that point, I was doing this much PR and she was doing this much PR, and she was getting offers of records and
Oh well.
concerts at first I was young. I was 26 or something. At first I was like, what? I didn't know quite how to wrap my head around that, because she was my best friend.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, of course, it has nothing to do with competition. It's our own personal spiritual path. She's she whatever, however, whatever brought her to this point, you know, she has these open spaces for this stuff to come in, and I have a different job to do,
Oh yeah.
for my own growth. So, and that was good at that point because that totally dealt with my concept of competition. I never really was competitive after that. I mean, healthy competitive, like, oh, you're playing at Catalina's. Oh, I could get a gig at Catalina's, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
never like, you know. So, yeah, so there's that too, or for me, there's that it's like, okay, well, I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm creating it, and
Exactly. That's a great way to look at it. That's something I need to hear, because I get caught up in like, how come that guy got the call and I didn't? Like, and we all do that. I think, oh, he called him. What? Um, and I really believe that there's enough gigs out there for everybody. So I'm happy when people get work. I want everybody to be working. I'm not one of those people that thinks like, you know, I should, have gigs over other people and stuff. But it's hard to not be like, okay, well, I wanted to do that, or it'd be great if that person called me. So yeah, that's a wonderful way to think about it, and I need to do that more. Just realizing like, okay, these are the moments, and
yeah.
opening yourself up for that.
And
Yeah.
in all these conversations that I've had over the years, and I can think of very famous like people from New York, like jazz people like in our kind of
Oh yeah.
tribe, so to speak. And time and time again, they said they just put one foot in front of the other.
Oh
They
yeah.
went out to hear some music. Like David Amram, are you familiar with his name?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he said he went to see, I think it was Charlie. Yeah, he went to see Charlie Parker, and he was sitting around. At that time, he played French horn,
Oh, I didn't even know
jazz
he.
French horn.
Oh
Yeah,
really?
and so Charlie Mingus came up to them, and Charlie Parker said, "This guy plays great French horn." And Charlie Mingus said, "Oh, do you want to come to Europe with us?" So it was like that kind of thing. You show up,
Yeah.
you have what you do, is,
Oh yeah.
worthwhile. And
Yeah.
then you're open for possibilities. And so many people said that to me about their lives and careers, on and on and on, all these people, so I like that way of living. I think that's a really good point of view to pass on, you know. It's like, yeah, just do your best, keep moving forward, you know, and you get to live life, right?
Oh,
And
yeah,
you know, it delivers.
yeah, yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And going back to COVID, I think we all, or at least I, spent a little darkness in there, like,
Oh yeah.
is this industry over? Like legally we couldn't play gigs. There was a lot of like, I don't
Yeah.
know how to go forward with this. So the opening back up and a lot of these things, I think is a good thing for everybody's headspace, giving us a little bit more opportunities.
I totally agree. Um, of course, now I want to, I don't know, show up somewhere with you and play, but
Let's do it. I'll bet you we can meet somewhere in Irvine. It's the middle ground.
So you have, let's see. Well, my friend actually posted. Now here's a PR thing. Are you familiar with allmusic.com?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't, maybe you did this, you know, yourself, but you have 92 credits here.
Yeah, and I think Dave Wayne might be part of this, where he was. But yes, there's definitely, and this is kind of a nice look at what I've been doing, because a lot of people just think I'm, avant-garde drummer. Castanets is a folk band. My friend Ray Raposa ran, so I'm in a couple of those. And Rabbinical School Dropouts was a crazy, like, I guess, avant-garde klezmer. Anyway, they
Oh,
were all
wow.
at they were all at UCSD, and then they got John Zorn to put out one of their records. So there's a couple things, and
Wow.
Rafter right there is my buddy who does sort of pop rock, definitely populist music, and I played with him for many years. So there's a nice overview of different things. Um, uh,
This one you
from
looks like you were playing everything.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So that's the large ensemble, and then yeah, you know how it is with drummers. We have to overdub everything. Um,
What is what tell us about the large ensemble.
um, well, I love. I grew up. Some of the first things I did was school band. So I grew up playing in concert bands and then in marching bands,
Yeah.
and and yeah, you don't really think about it at that age. It's you just play in these
Yeah.
groups, and then later on you realize like there's something magical about a lot of people playing together.
Yeah.
You get 20 trumpets and all these things, or whatever that is. And then in college, clearly I was playing in the wind ensemble and playing in the big bands and stuff. So, and as I started writing more and more, I got to the point where like I'm pretty much everything I was writing was kind of, single line with chord situations. I'm like, okay, I need to write more, trying to figure out I'm hearing more things and I'm writing more. So I was writing music that involved more parts, and it kind of just naturally got to the point where I was like, maybe I should put a larger group together. I tried to put an 8-piece group with four horns fairly early on when I was in my thing. I went to San Diego High School, and then I went up to Palomar College, which is in San Marcos. Great community college, wonderful program, top-notch theory program. And then I went down to San Diego State and studied with Rick Helzer and Danley Mitchell, who worked with Harry Parch. So through all of that, I'm writing. I'm a percussionist and I'm studying percussion, but I'm writing more and more, and I'm studying all these things. And I was really into 20th century avant-garde classical music. So I just started writing more and more, and I thought, well, I know all these people. This is just coming out of college, and I'm pretty sure I can get them all to show up and not charge me too much, or maybe play for free. Luckily, and so I just wrote some pieces and put a couple concerts together. At that point in San Diego, it was a little bit easier to put on DIY concerts. So, and we did a few things, and I learned a lot about orchestration just having these pieces played. And I just kept working on them. And at some point, I thought, okay, I need to figure out how to record this. Um, I talked to Kim Richmond, and Kim Richmond told me the story about how much he paid to do his record. And I was like, I can't do that. So we ended up recording it. At that point, there was a big push in San Diego, and everybody was recording themselves. And also, this was like the early, this was '03, '02, '03, '04. So it was just the beginning point of where you could buy a Macintosh computer and a
Yeah.
Pro Tools rig.
Uh,
It wasn't going to cost you a ton of money, and you were able to multi-track. So
yeah.
I put a little bit of money in and had a 16 channel, 16 track recorder, and borrowed some microphones and borrowed some chairs and put a recording session together. So did that and put out a record, I believe '04. It might have been '05. So that was really nice. And that came out on the Circumvention label, which is Jason Robinson's label, who's out in Massachusetts now, saxophonist.
Hmm.
And and as I don't know if you've dealt with this, but putting 30 people in a room is really hard. So we play once a year, once every other year. Um, and I kept writing stuff, and then I recorded more material, I think right before we moved to Arizona. So
Uh,
I got everybody, and I kind of branched out. I had Andrew Pask come down and play Barry, and Chris Tyner, who's in Bakersfield, great trumpet player, buddy of mine, came down, and Tom McNally came down from LA. So there was a little bit broader of a. The first record was definitely San Diego, although Harris Eisenstadt came down and played drums because at that point we were playing duo a little bit, and Eric Sabar, who's a great euphonium player who was at Cal Arts, he came down and played on that. So and then the next thing, I recorded all of it, and then we moved to Arizona, and I was just broke. So that didn't come out for a few years until I got a gig that paid enough and my wife was okay with me putting all that money towards putting that out. So I put out a second record, which came out on Arenda in 2016. So those the two documents I have of that band. And there's a few tracks that are on various compilations. There was a musicians collective in San Diego called Tremor Flora Collective, which ran from like 99 to 2010, and we put on concerts and festivals, and we also put out a couple compilation CDs.
yeah. So,
So
was this, you had mentioned it was similar to Vinny's large ensemble. I mean, I remember seeing Vinny's ensemble a long time ago and being, like so blown away by the effect was amazing.
yeah, yeah.
So so do you compose basically like he composes like they're kind of strange compositions, but
Oh
there's a
yeah.
form and
Oh
then
yeah.
people can play in it and when at that time he was directing too. He'd like direct this section to play and
Oh
then
yeah, yeah.
direct that section to play. Is it that kind of thing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the overall overarching kind of big band tradition. So there's still plenty of stuff where there's metronomic time,
Yeah.
some sort of harmonic progression. A lot of my music ends up being more modal than like kind of bebop 251s.
Yeah.
And like I love Kenny Wheeler's music and a lot of those people that write these wonderful melodies and stuff. Pierre Favre is a really amazing French drummer, and he's written a few large ensemble groups as well. So there's that. There's plenty of times where there's a melody with a bunch of large harmonization, and then a solo section that could be over changes or maybe open, going on to another melody. I really tried to use the idea that like rather than just doing head solo head solo head,
Yeah.
you can modify these things and put middle sections in and things that morph out of a solo section and those kinds of ideas. Sometimes just a little use of graphic notation to get us in the right space where it's more of an improvised space. Um, uh, Kind of running the gamut from that. And there usually ends up a couple like sort of Afrobeat inspired kind of sections. Um,
Huh.
so kind of running that gamut from like very,
Yeah.
like what you'd hear on a Fela Kuti record all the way over to what you'd hear on like a Cecil Taylor record. That's kind of the breadth of it to summarize. I've never really thought about it like that, but it is kind of true. So there's all those different things and trying to give like a lot of different spaces, letting people play, sometimes group ensembles. I was really into the idea of like the sort of concerto grosso idea. So there'd be a group that can actually improvise together. And because a lot of the large ensemble was based out of groups I was playing with. I was playing in a group called Cosmologic, which was Michael Jessen, who's at UC Irvine right now, and Scott Walton, bass player, who's now in France, and Jason Robinson, who's in Western Massachusetts. So there would be a section where it was just Cosmologic could play, and there'd be backgrounds that could be cued. Early on, Christopher Adler, great composer and pianist here in San Diego, was a conductor. And then, and because I wanted to play drums, and then at some point I realized like I should probably just conduct. So there was kind of a switch over, like you're saying with Vinny. Like Vinny, you know, when you watch him, he's able to go play sometimes, and then he's able to conduct, or he has somebody else conduct, and he gets up and conducts a little bit. The drumming, me running things from the drum seat is really a challenge.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
realized there's not really any gray area there. It's either one or the
yeah,
other. So that was
yeah,
a
yeah.
sort of moment where I was like, okay, I just have to, yeah.
Yeah. I'm lucky to have Vinny once a month at this venue that I started kind of whipping up jazz for, at Kulak's Woodshed in North
Oh yeah,
Hollywood.
I saw the recent the quintet
Yeah,
flyer for that. That's wonderful.
God, it's sounding so amazing. Um, and the band is beautiful. The drummer is really interesting. His first name is Clint.
Yeah, Clint Dodson. I
Yeah,
know him very well.
wow. He's very intriguing. He's really good. But it's just
Yeah.
so great to see and hear Vinny once a month. I mean, it's luxurious for me. I keep trying to talk about PR, man. I try and whip up an audience for that. I really, really desire to have that music attract uh, people, and
Yeah.
Brad Dutz had a series for a few years in Sunland, which is close by North Hollywood.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
very tiny little place called Sunspace, and had a lot of avant-garde stuff. He was doing it actually every Thursday, and um, it was a small room. Sometimes the room actually was packed, sometimes not. But I mean, I just want people to experience this
Oh yeah.
more open form, and
Yeah.
I know there's people out there who would like it if they were there.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
God, it drives me crazy. But it's
And
so
well, and I love that the sun space. I love that space. But and you start to think about these venues as like, okay, what like my friend Keith Kelly always talks about like, well, it's like there's sort of a vibe of the venue. There,
yes,
it has to be somewhat close, right? And parking is kind of
yes.
part of that too. And then like probably alcohol, maybe, or at least something. You know, it has to have something. So, and I keep pondering like, what else is it that like brings people to a venue or allows that to happen? Because there's a couple venues in LA that I love. Sorry.
Have you seen yet? Have you seen Oracle
Yeah, I just played Oracle.
with Wayne?
Yeah, it was supposed to be because Stuart and Vinny and I put out this. We just put out this trio thing
Oh,
that's live, um,
wow.
and so we were supposed. It was somewhat of a disaster. I got food poisoning, so I skipped. I missed the first gig, and then Vinny was
Oh,
sick, and he missed both of the gigs. The
oh,
so the first gig was in Santa Barbara at Piano Kitchen, and Stuart ended up doing it with Sean Sondergrasser and Peter Valsamis. And then the next night, Vinny was still sick, so it was me and Stuart and Wayne Pete. But the Oracle's great. That's a really nice venue. Daryl's doing great stuff there.
great,
Um,
man. I think it has a great vibe. I booked a night for me and my group, which is kind of along all these lines, called The Moment, with Gary Fukushima
yeah,
and Chuck Manning. It was Brad Dutz until he moved, and a guitarist named Jeff Richmond. But things change, and it's been over years that we've played. But
yeah.
anyway, booked it, and I didn't. It was a week after my knee operation.
Oh wow,
My doctor said,
probably not the best.
"No way. You're not gonna want to be there. You're gonna be in pain." So I had to actually bow out. So the band went, but
Oh
so
great.
now I need another gig there because, yeah, I just thought I think it's great. I really want to do that, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a really nice space. Kind of reminds me of there was that series Line Space Line that was in Silver Lake. What was that little, it was
Curve
called like
line,
No, it was called
not curve line.
Salvation Theater or something.
Mm,
Anyways, a nice kind of smaller room, but like plenty of room for people,
yeah,
and and um, just kind of works well. And it seemed like the neighborhood's cool. Parking's not
yeah,
so much of an issue,
yeah,
and especially on a Monday night,
yeah.
like there's always those
And
things.
then
So
Tuesday night, the guy from Sunspace does Unusual Tuesdays.
that's right. He's still doing those. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
which
great.
I have yet to get out there. I gotta, now that I'm feeling like I can move around a little bit more, much to my husband's dismay, I'm sure I'll be I'll be going out more.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, all of those situations like those like need to happen more. There's a few of those happening in San Diego right now. San Diego seems to be based a lot around jam sessions, which is I like jam sessions, but also I think there needs to be a healthy balance where people are presenting new work or presenting
Yeah.
originals and having space to do that, not just as like an opening set. Um, but I mean, just in terms of bringing people out and paying the bills and stuff, we all know that jam sessions work, and jam sessions are a great just
Yeah.
social network and allows people to come out that maybe they wouldn't come out
Yeah.
for something else like that. So that's a nice thing too.
It's funny. I had this one jam session for like 16 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm okay, thank you, honey. Actually, Gary, if um my husband has been so attentive to me since I had my knee operation.
Nice.
Um I had this jam session for 16 years.
Yeah.
And it was in a great location. It was at the Sportsman's Lodge, which was in um like Studio City area. But at that time it was really great. And it was in a big lounge. Um there was no real stage. There was kind of a smallish dance floor, and I would put the band there. And at that time, it was there. It lasted 7 years. During that time, it was amazing. Just it was a real mix of musicians and singers,
Oh
and
yeah.
people came in doing tango, and just all kinds of stuff. And I was very open for for anybody coming in,
Yeah.
and it was just great. And of course, every gig ends,
Was this
unfortunately.
week? This was weekly?
Yeah, every
Oh.
Wednesday. And we had great crowds too, like up to 200 people,
Oh
which,
wow, that's amazing.
yeah. And then it closed, and I found other locations, and it slowly over the next few years kind of died down to for me, what was a mediocre singer jam. And I took it
Mm,
as long as I could take it. And then I was
yeah.
like, I can't take it anymore. So I stopped doing that. And then I've had jams, like in the last year or two, I've had a monthly jam where the singers, I wouldn't say they're mediocre. They're not super professional, but I always have a really good trio and, so on.
Yeah.
But right now, in the last few months, I haven't actually been doing it, partly because of Kulaks. But it's yeah. I mean, I like jams. I like the kind of jams that are mixed. I don't. I'm not a big fan of just singer jams. To me, that's like it's just not. It's not fun. And I want to involve everybody, playing with each other. And that's kind of a different thing, I guess. Now I think a lot of the jams are instrumental in the city, in LA, and like kind of for up and coming players. There's mostly that going on now, So,
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about. There's a few jam sessions here in San Diego that are more based around singers sitting in, and then other ones where I don't see as many singers. Um, and San Diego has this. There's sort of a not dive bar, but there's a couple of these spaces that are kind of more classic, old school steakhouses kind of thing, where it
yeah,
turns into like there's people coming out of the crooner tradition and stuff. And That's an interesting, and those don't. There's also a really strong bebop scene. Gilbert Castellanos, of course, has his jam session, and those two worlds don't always mix. So I never thought about it like that. It's really interesting. 16 years is mind-boggling because I did a concert series that the Tremor Flora Collective ran, and I was, maybe not always in charge of it, but I definitely spent a few years. And after a few years, I was like, I just can't do this. I can't imagine 16 years. And that was just, we started out weekly and we realized it was too much. So we started
Yeah,
doing monthly things. And even that after a while, it was just too much work.
it is. It's an awful lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Let's listen to some music of yours again.
sure.
Um, and so I am going back to this page. Um,
Yeah.
I, I had typed in trio on the top. So should I stay there or should I, what do
Um,
you think I should do?
uh, sure. I think there's a few recent things that I've done. I did this trio right here, the Purple Cactus Flower, is kind of an interesting one. It's a guitar trio, and we put out a record 3 years ago, and it's kind of a funny situation. I kept putting out these huge, the large ensemble, and then I put out a collection. It was 5 CDs. That was all one record,
Oh,
5 volumes. And at some point, my wife said, maybe you should just do a trio record. And I was like, what? Trio? I can't. So, anyways, and I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, that might be fun, actually. So that was a nice a band. I'm working on a second recording of that group, but I thought that was a nice challenge. Instead of, having every possible option, just paring it down to that and seeing what I would write and things like that. Trying to come up with a sort of body of tunes for that as well.
is this the same guitarist and bassist from what we saw earlier?
Um, I think it was Louis on the live gig, and then if you do the Purple Cactus Flower, that's Kevin. So that's Kevin Jones is on the record, and then Louis Valenzuela, who's a great guitar player from San Diego, we play with all the time.
Cool. Okay, great. Here we go. Thank you. Thank you. Really cool song.
Thank you.
Was that your song?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was sort of the challenge was can I just shorter pieces, um, uh, but still interesting to me, and like put a book together um, that could be used on a couple different situations, and but based around the idea of like a trio or maybe a quartet, um,
Yeah.
and one page each.
One
Because
page.
Nathan Hubbard writes these like 8-page tunes and it's like can we they don't even fit in the book, come on. So yeah, that was sort of the challenge, like can I write a book of tunes that are all one page, they're all good, just strong tunes, and yeah, it was a nice challenge.
Well, I have a question from my friend Taylor Hatch, who's a guitarist, and
Yeah.
he's over at um, North Texas, and he this Taylor, this is a new question for you. When you write, how much of your time is spent writing by hand versus putting the music into notation?
Okay, I in right when I got to Palomar, which was 94 or 95, that was, everybody was starting to get with Finale, and I did a little bit of that. And then I never liked it, and I do everything by hand.
Really?
Even the large ensemble charts, everything. Let's see if I can grab a chart real quick.
So you don't put,
So,
after you write, you don't put anything into programs?
no, so everything looks like that.
Wow, that's very nice.
Um, and this is true. I mean, the problem is with the large ensemble or some of those things, it takes forever. But pretty much not pretty much, all of my charts are written by hand. And then clearly some of the stuff that uses more extended notation, graphic notation, stuff like that, that's a little bit easier. My friend Chris Tyner, he's managed to figure out how to do some of those graphic notations, and he's got really interesting modular notation that he does in Finale, or it might be Sibelius. I'm pretty sure it's just Finale. But for me, it starts usually just with a pencil score.
Yeah.
I'm just writing down whatever it is, and then at some point I ink it.
Oh, I remember, well, I mean, even when I went to college, I remember the feeling of writing by hand. There was
Yeah.
something, really incredible, you know, that kind of that little connection coming through you and
Oh yeah.
really a beautiful, beautiful feeling. I do put a lot of, I start writing by hand, of course, myself, and then I put a lot of stuff into Sibelius because I can change keys real easy and
See, that's where it gets tricky. And if you need to transpose, you've got 4 trumpet parts, and I'm
yeah.
I'm actually it's kind of hilarious because anytime I'm on a gig where I'm playing vibes and the singer's like, "Can we do this in F?" I am terrible at that, but I can do in real time transpose E flat and B flat charts and copy it out in another key. And so something in my brain, I've been thinking about this recently. I need to figure out why those two don't connect.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
interesting.
changing keys and especially you write a tune, you're just like, okay, maybe it works better if it's a half step down or something.
Yeah.
Or or the worst is when you're like 2/3 of the way through the page and you skip a bar. That's
That's even bad in Sibelius too. It's like,
I
what the
know.
hell did I do?
Yeah. And I've got, I have a literal like a folder around here that just has little scraps of cut pieces of, and glue, and I've spent years doing this. So that's just seems to be my uh, I just put too many years into it where I'm kind of stuck with it at this point. I think it works. I have a friend who keeps telling me he's gonna scan all of it and actually do a Nathan Hubbard font for Sibelius, which I'm waiting. I want to see it
That's kind of
actually.
cool. You know
Yeah,
that friend I told you about who is my singer friend who kept getting all these offers and stuff.
yeah,
So her book was in total disarray. She
yeah,
just she knew that polka dots and moonbeams was, in this spot. I don't know how she knew. And so
Whoa.
I kept getting on her because from when I was young, 'cause my dad was a sax player and his
Okay.
books were numerical.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
so I realized that musicians can't really spell the same way from musician to musician. So I just put numbers on everything. And so I numbered her whole book. The next time I looked in her book, it was all out of order.
Of course.
She just, she didn't operate like that.
Yeah, there's just some people that just doesn't function for.
Yeah.
I actually the number thing's interesting because it's true. You think about like a night in Tunisia. Is it a? Do you put it
Yeah.
under a or do you put it under n? And then any song that starts with the,
Yeah.
is it the or do you start like these things boggle my mind and I'm
Me
still trying to
too.
figure that out. Yeah. I actually
Even with
have
my book, I worry about that because the lyrics, I'm
yeah.
alphabetized, but that always comes up.
Yeah, it's a strange like okay, and I've noticed that certain I have a bunch of the whatever, and some of them I have under the, and then other ones I don't. I'm trying to figure out what that is. That's I need to fix that because that can be a challenge.
Me too. I'm the same way. I don't know why. Certain songs I put under T, and then other songs I don't. It's the second word. I wonder. I mean, that's just who knows what that is. Doesn't really matter. It would be nice to make a little policy. It's always the second word.
Yeah,
Ah
it's
is a little weird because and then you get into there, THERE, and that also gets weird because it's not the R.
oh yeah,
I mean, if you had something like these foolish things or something, would you put it, you know, right after their,
will be another you. Yeah,
yeah, right.
exactly.
So I
Yeah,
don't know. It's a little strange.
yeah. I have with the handwritten thing, I have been scanning a lot.
Ah,
That's the thing, and that's been the last like 10 years. And now it's a little bit easier, so I just have a Dropbox. I
yeah.
have a large folder with all of my tunes. So if we are on a gig and some I don't have the chart or something, or there's it seems like most of the people at this point are iPadding it,
It
and
does seem like that. And you know what? I mean, this stuff is just kind of, stuff that we do go through, and maybe people listening don't know that we go through this all the time, but
yeah.
we do go through this stuff. It's just minuscule kind of stuff. But you know who actually was one of the first people I ever saw use the iPad thing was Peter Sprague.
Yeah, and he's a king at it, right? He's got his whole
Yeah.
book, and everybody has
Yeah.
the switcher pedals and everything. I haven't seen his book, but Justin Grinnell plays with him, and I know Duncan Moore very well and
Yeah.
all these things. So yeah, it seems like he's got it down to a science. And
That's why
the
I like
switcher pedal is really interesting too, because like I was saying about one-page charts, you have two-page charts, you have three-page charts,
Yep.
you have a chart that has a DS or it's got a coda, and that gets really sketchy. And
Yeah.
find yourself reminding piano player, don't forget there's a third page,
Yeah.
and then how do they get back? And especially if you're just calling tunes on the bandstand, that can be a little tricky.
Yeah, this
Um,
area is kind of it's a little strange. It's not always the same.
yeah,
I have I'm a great starter of projects and not a great finisher. So I have a switcher pedal, but I haven't learned how to use it. I
yeah,
have scanned songs, but I need to clean it up. And I have had my iPad where I can use it, but then I don't, it's like, do I use it for the lyrics or do I use it for the piano player? Or, and some people say, send me the charts ahead and I'll put them
yeah,
into my iPad. And it's like, well, I don't generally know the sets ahead. I
yeah,
kind of do it
exactly.
last minute but I used to schlep my 500 book, charts, you know,
Yeah,
and
that
that,
can.
that was way too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's got to be tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I found the Dropbox kind of helpful because if they
Yeah.
just have it on the thing and I said, okay, let's do this tune. Oh, I don't have that. Okay, what's in the Dropbox? They can just pull it up
Yeah.
and download it real quick if that's needed. It's not always perfect, but and then I'll make separate folders. Like if there's a specific gig, then I can just email everybody
Yeah.
because there's a few people. hopefully they're not watching, that will email me like 30 charts, right? So you literally get 30 emails, and each chart's one email, and then you have to go through and save each one to a folder, and you're like, oh, just send me a Google Drive link or something.
Yeah, yeah,
So I find that way easier. Just okay, here's the link to the charts. Here's a link to demo audio if that's needed. You know, if I have a recording and
yeah,
nobody understands what this music is.
yeah,
Um, that makes a little bit more ease for
yeah.
me.
That's a step up on the food chain.
I mean, and then
I would.
clearly there's people where you just, you know, they're like, can you bring charts? Yes, I have charts for you. I did this this is my catch up year in terms of COVID records and stuff that I've been sitting on that I didn't feel like I could promote. So I put out my friend Curtis's, this is Troikestra Electronics Trio, and then we mentioned that the Vinnie Golia Stuart Liebig Trio.
I definitely want to hear that one. Wow.
That's two 40-minute live sets, one from Piano Kitchen in Santa Barbara, and then another set from Long Beach at I forget what the venue is called. But I finally got
By the way, where can we get these?
these are all on Bandcamp, and a few of them are up on streaming. I don't think the more recent ones have gone up yet. The trio we just heard, this record's called This Stream, and that's,
Okay.
if you're a CD person, that's totally on Bandcamp, or if you buy digital files, that's on Bandcamp. And this is definitely on um, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, all of that. And
Do you like using Bandcamp a lot?
I do. It seems to work pretty well. There's still people. I like CDs. I like making CDs. It gives it a little bit of a um, like a this actually happened.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff where it's just digital files, and people don't take it seriously, or
Yeah.
don't, not seriously, but they don't.
No, I know what you mean.
There's just sort of like there's a lot of people just putting up, you know,
Yeah.
audio.
Yeah.
So, but I put up this, which is sorry, it's hard to see with the
It's
thing.
beautiful cover.
It's a collection of my notated works, sort of 20th century classical, I guess. So pieces for vibraphone, cello, violin,
Mm,
voice, piano.
wow.
Um, and but the reason I mention this is because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write these pieces, and I started writing them on 11 by 17
Oh,
sheets, which was, it seemed like a good idea. This is a reoccurring thing in my life. It seemed like a good idea, but then how do you scan 11 by 17? You have to go, you know, I don't have an 11 by 17 scanner, and then how does that fit on the iPad, right? You actually have to turn, you know, because the idea is that you have more paper so you can see this. Let me see. Give me 10 seconds. Let me see if I can find the score real
all right.
quick.
Meanwhile, I'll show you guys his Bandcamp page. This is his Bandcamp page,
Okay.
and I'm sure he has more. This is
Yeah.
just what some. This is right. You
Yeah.
have
This is, yeah. So clearly this is more recent all the way to old. So the Necessary Downturn is the new compositions. Lost Balloon Company is sort of an ambient record of field recordings. This Stream is the trio that we heard. The Hunter's Moon is just a hour and 10 minute full performance of me and Vinny Golio playing duo. Lattice Trust is the quartet of Alex Klein, Stuart Liebig, G. Stinson, and me playing vibraphone and electronics. I have sort of a I've been playing solo drums for a little bit, which kind of gets into, it's not the Max Roach solo drums, it's more of an avant-garde thing. So both those Cascadia callings are the solo drums.
Oh, cool.
Fiercely Dreaming, that's the large ensemble. And then I mentioned that five volume thing about my
Oh yeah.
hometown. So that's, every track is a different ensemble. All of my compositions spanning from sort of like the ECM modal kind of floaty end of the jazz spectrum to um, most of it's pretty melodic and different ideas.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
So the idea of the 11 by 17, so you get a sheet like this,
Oh,
which looks beautiful, right?
okay.
But
Yeah.
but then you're like, okay, how do I? Okay, so I scan this, and then also, how do I take it to gigs? Do I fold it in half,
Yeah.
and then you put it? Anyways, I think
Can
it's
you
more.
could you show us that again?
Oh yeah, sure.
'Cause I've seen music like this, but not a lot. So, like, let's just start with the first. Is it a bar? It's in bars, right? Measured?
It's yeah. Well, it's sort of set up so the very first is it was written for trio, and the idea is that each section is just there's these three different pitches, right?
Yeah.
And actually, you could play it solo if you just wanted to play it on a piano or a vibraphone or whatever. With the idea that this is usually played by a string trio, and each of these could is a measure. I guess that's an easy way of thinking at, and you can repeat each one. The idea is that there's just these pitches that happen, and they very slowly shift.
Okay.
And and depending on the performance for the recording, I think we ended up just doing four times each, four times, four times, four times. And then we also did a take where it was just one bar each,
Yeah.
which was obviously shorter. But the idea is just this kind of slowly unfolding pitch idea. These pitches happen. One note changes, the next note changes, and it just kind of turns into this very slowly undulating kind of thing. It looks cool. It's a bit of a pain in terms of gigging or like we were talking about putting it on the iPad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And how would you even write that in something like Finale or Sibelius? You wouldn't, right?
Like I was saying, I've seen Chris Tyner do things that make that work, and I'm sure there's other people out there. For me, it made more sense. I actually had to some of these pieces. The challenge is actually how to notate them. I
Yeah.
have. Let me see if I can find it. I had this piece that was just kind of a scalar idea.
By the way, Taylor said he thinks 1117 is the way to go for a big band.
1117. Um, oh yeah, no, I have a few large ensemble pieces that use that too, and it's and also just the idea. Well, this is getting really dorky, but you got 24 people in a band, right? And then you have to make 24 11 by 17 copies. You end up just spending so much money on copies and stuff. It gets ridiculous. I don't know where the other piece is, but I had this piece that's it's just these pitches ascending and you
Yeah.
go up and down. And as the piece continues, these pitches there's more pitches added and there's more pitches added. And I spent months trying to figure out how to make it work on a piece of paper so you could go that way and then you could also go backwards. So I ended up, I'm still not really happy with what the notation looks like, but that was sort of an idea. And I think the handwritten thing allows you a little bit more freedom in that. So you can, it turns into like a fun art project in some ways.
Taylor has a few questions.
Mhm.
If you could use your favorite chords to use in any progression, what would they be?
Ooh, favorite chords. I seem to sort of push towards a little bit darker chords. Like it's pretty rare when I use. I've been writing a little bit more kind of singer-songwritery stuff, and clearly I get called to make tracks and do things that use more kind of triads and stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of my music, I've been trying to push the idea where it's not completely atonal, but sometimes the chords don't function exactly like they would in like a just 1 4 5 2 5 1, all these different chord progressions. So the idea of maybe adding some extra notes that aren't quite there in a
Hmm.
traditional sense.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of pushing that, and clearly like I study with Rick Helzer.
Yeah.
He's one in terms of jazz tradition, Wayne Shorter and those kinds of people. Um, Ralph Towner, some of those people that are really adding these extra notes, where you do have a chord that has like the fifth and like a sharp 12 or something, those
Yeah.
strange things. So that's kind of where I seem to default.
Yeah. Will Salmon yesterday when we heard something he did with a violinist who I think might be from San Diego, a woman who was really good. Was her name Rebecca or something? Anyway, um,
Yeah.
he had this piano that was some people would not play it. It was so out of tune and sounding so,
Yeah.
like old piano, but it was gorgeous. He was playing, and all the tension and the resonance was just, it was really attractive, to
Oh
me
yeah,
anyway. But yeah, it was great. And
yeah. I love that. I love. For me, it's often the sound. I just let's see, not last weekend, 2 weekends ago, there was a microtonal symposium in San Diego, and San Diego has always been kind of this microtonal hotbed. Harry Parch was here, um, and there's been a few other people over the years. Jonathan Glazier obviously was here, who built. His father built some of the instruments that Parch used,
oh,
and so and it's really interesting to. Clearly, I went to San Diego State. I studied with Stanley Mitchell, and one of the reasons was my interest in Harry Parch and this music. But at some point, I realized like the microtonal thing and these tunings didn't interest in me enough as much as the sound of the instruments. And I think that's what you're talking about with the like with an older piano, right? You get the
yeah,
creaks and the and it's not doesn't really fit into a tuning system, but
yeah,
it has this weird, interesting sound. And then clearly that's a percussionist thing. Everybody loves the all those overtones when you hit a
yeah,
gong, or
yeah,
those crazy high things when you hit a triangle and you're like, "Ooh, that's like a little rainbow over there." So for me, that's what I love about all those things is like how to bring out more of those colors and
yeah,
those things. And that's true my electronic stuff too. A lot of my electronic stuff is how to bring out more of those colors into those into that world.
yeah, yeah. Very cool. Um, let's see. Taylor would also, let's see. What's the weirdest? I like this question, Taylor. What's the weirdest piece of music that you heard that gave you inspiration?
Ooh, the weirdest music
See
I
if
ever
you
heard.
can answer that question, Nathan. I dare you.
I mean, there's a lot of records of it. I remember hearing Live Evil for the first time.
Uh-huh.
Miles Davis, with
Yeah.
the IRTO,
Yeah.
and that just blew my mind. I had no idea that world existed. And then same thing with On the Corner. I remember hearing that, and that record scared me for a long time. Which is like you listen to it now, and it's not that weird, but when I first heard it, that really changed my perception of that. Um, the
Well, those were good
weirdest.
answers.
Yeah, those are good. I at some point a few years ago, I was teaching a college class on it was a sound class, right? And so I'm teaching people about cables and microphones and stuff like that. And I had this whole lecture built around different recordings. And it started. I had the original Thomas Edison recording of "Mary Had a Little Lamb"
Oh,
from the wax cylinder, which is it's an odd recording if you listen to it.
ah,
And one of the recordings I used was Jason Kahn, he was a drummer in L.A. He was in a punk band with Joe Baeza. What's the name of that? Anyways, and he lives in Europe now, and he's more of a does things with field recordings. And he had this recording that was just snow falling on contact mics, and I would play this at the class, and I was, what is this? What is this sound? And everybody was like, I have no idea. So that I always think of that recording, and that's a really interesting one. Um, and probably just nature in general. Like I
yeah,
love just sitting around listening to birds or listening to these different things.
yeah.
Hopefully, my whole neighborhood has been ripped up in the last year and a half. They're putting in a new sewer line, so pretty much all we listen to these days is tractors. It's consistent.
I used to, before, I guess before the pandemic, I used to go up the five a little, and there was this, I just found this road one day, and it was kind of my experience about going up to Idlewild. Like, you
Yeah.
get on the way up to Idlewild, you can get out of the car, and then there's a beautiful, it's not a silence, but it's different. You get out and it feels less cacophonous,
Oh
but
yeah. Oh, I know that feeling.
you
Yes.
experience, like, I think it's also sensation too. And you hear these sounds that you're not really accustomed to really listen to, because usually they're there's more sound on top of these sounds. But you realize after a while, it's like, oh, I think I'm hearing the insects. It's like,
Exactly. And
yeah,
how funny is that that we're not used to hearing that? Like that we're so ingrained into this
yeah,
this metropolitan kind of situation where it's not like
yeah,
there was a bee that flew in my house the other day and I was like I haven't heard a bee, that zzz.
yeah.
It's such an amazing thing. Yeah, Idlewild, it's amazing. I love I I would love to. Maybe I don't need to figure out what it is, but you're totally right. There's something magic about the difference in the sound
Yeah.
and the air and all of that.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful. I miss that. We had so much rain. I think the road that I'm talking about that I off of the five, I think it actually closed because of, the rain damage. But um
You're
I
talking
do want
about like up past, like headed towards Gorman, like
well,
up
actually, this
through
is
the
just
valley.
about 20 minutes north of me. I'm in Granada Hills, which is like
Okay,
Northridge,
yeah,
and just about 20 minutes north. So not that far. It just felt the same as going up to Idlewild because for a year I was teaching in Idlewild,
yeah, yeah.
and I just going up there, and also because I'd stay over a few days, just come outside. It was just
Yeah, yeah,
beautiful.
it's amazing. Yeah, I haven't been up there in quite a few years. I need to get back up there. Yeah, I think part of I went up to Bakersfield, I think a month ago, and part of the Grapevine coming south, part of that's shut down because there was a slide, there was some sort of slide, and they shut down. It was actually kind of sketchy because I came back, I left Bakersfield about 8 o'clock, so I hit the Grapevine about 10 o'clock, so it was dark and everybody's driving, like 150 down that road, and all of a sudden two of those lanes shut down, and there's all those.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of. I was reminded how much the Grapevine, like we don't have an autobahn in California, but that's kind of our autobahn, right?
Yes.
People driving way too fast and
Are
super
you
dangerous road.
well, first of all, Roland, I have never listened to trees talking to each other. No. Have you?
Trees talking to each other? No, I have not.
I haven't, Roland. You'll have to tell me about that. But you also are an instrument builder, right?
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about that too?
Sure. It really just being a percussionist, I think it's pretty natural. It started when I was in high school. The family business is sewer contracting, so I grew up around drill presses and grinders and wire wheels and wheel saws and things like that. So um, it I remember in high school I had a cymbal stand that I needed to make shorter, and I just took it down there, asked the guy to show me how to work it, went, and I was like, oh, that's easy. And then I realized, like, oh, I can do that to like a pipe, and I can hit the pipe. And
Uh,
so it just kind of came out of that. And then clearly, I think when I was in 11th grade, that the Hal Wilner Meditations on Mingus record came out, which was a really strange record. It's Bill Frisell and um, I think Keith Richards is on part of it.
uh,
There's all these entries, but they used the Harry Partch instruments, and that came about through Francis Thumb, who actually lives down the street from me,
oh,
and he hooked that up and got the instruments from. They were in New Jersey with Dean Drummond. Went to New York and used those. So that was the first time I heard these giant marimbas and stuff like that. I realized like, oh,
uh,
there's like people have been doing this, and I need to take this farther. And also at the same time, Mickey Hart, the drummer from the Grateful Dead, put out a
yeah.
book called Planet Drum.
Uh,
Or, there was two books he put out, and he talked about all these different sounds, and he was bringing in all sorts of instruments. There's also a long section on Airto and these different drummers that he was influenced by. So put that all together, it's not too hard to take a fence post and cut it into pieces and make a little xylophone, or taking different things like that. And then at some point I realized I had one of those electronic pads, and it didn't work. So I unscrewed it and I realized it was just a piezo transducer from Radio Shack, what they call a contact mic. And I resoldered it and it worked. And I realized like, oh, I could actually take that piezo transducer and put it on a piece of metal and it'll amplify that. So
Oh,
that was sort of the start of that, the idea of like I can take these smaller sounds and drummers, it, it's hard to sustain, right? Most drums go. Cymbals have a little rivets, maybe there's a large gong or something, there's a little bit more sustain. But the idea of really building more sustain, like you could do with a voice or a trumpet or something like that. So the idea of amplification, not so much for volume, but for sustain, was really interesting to me and using those kinds of ideas. So I started building these metal frames with springs and
yeah.
knives and, you know, you playing with chopsticks. So that was kind of the beginning of that. And at this point, it's mostly just I've turned into a cymbal fixer because I have this equipment that I have access to. So people give me broken cymbals and I cut little chunks out of them. And then if the broken parts of the cymbal are so big, I actually turn the broken parts into other instruments. So I make these cymbal chains. Hold on, give me 10 seconds. Find the cymbal chain.
Broken cymbals. He fixes broken cymbals. Trying to wrap my head around that. Interesting.
Okay, so these are all just small chunks of cymbals that were broken. And I just cut them into little parts and then put them on a string. And they turn into sort of, they're like a nice wind chime alternative.
Nice.
So they end up on records. Brad Dutes has a couple of them. I've sold a few of them over the years to different people. So that's mostly what I seem to be doing is fixing cymbals at this point.
Now, when you say fixing cymbals, do you actually fix broken cymbals?
Well,
I mean, how do
I
you
mean,
fix a cymbal?
well, usually what happens on a cymbal is you've got the cymbal right and the edge cracks.
Okay.
That's the most common thing. Occasionally you'll have a crack in the middle of it or towards the bell.
Uh-huh.
Those are harder to fix. The ones at the edge, you just cut that little chunk out.
Oh, okay.
It's not perfect and it'll never sound quite as clean. It makes it just a little bit dirtier, but you can save that cymbal. Mel Lewis had this famous cymbal that he used in the 60s and it had this big chunk cut out of it. Everybody, it's on the,
Ah,
what's the alto player's name? Not Paul anyways, it's that famous record with Mel, and that's everybody talks about how great that Mel Lewis ride cymbal sound is. It's got this chunk cut out of it. So everybody, and if you look, there's definitely pictures of Elvin playing with a cymbal that's got something cut out of it and stuff. So that's the easy way. If there's something in the middle, you can gently cut it out. You basically have to stop the crack at both ends. So you cut a little bit farther, and then the tricky part is if it's around the bell, because at some point the cymbal's just going to fall off.
yeah.
So that's usually how I do it. People will either call me up, and then certain people just want rivets or
Yeah.
tambourine jingles or things like that put in their cymbals. So people will call me and say, hey, I've got 2 cymbals that I cracked. Can you cut these out? I have a friend, real heavy drummer, great drummer. He called me and said, I have all these, I have like 10 ride cymbals I broke. You should just come take them. So I turned those into instruments. Some of them I cut down. If there's too much cracks, I can cut into a smaller cymbal and make hi-hats out of it or a bell cymbal or something like that. So that seems to be most of the work. I think my days of building pipe xylophones and different things like that are kind of over. There was a point where I was trying to use those in compositions, and they come up in the skeleton key, the large ensemble. And then I have a duo percussionist buddy of mine from Detroit, and we play new music for silent film. So we use some of my instruments for that. But they don't get used as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Like you were saying about hauling around a book with 800 charts in it. After a while, you're like, I'm not going to haul around all 10 of my brake drums and like these ridiculous instruments. Like, this stuff doesn't even fit in my car anymore, and I'm going to break my back. So, it's funny.
The record with Vinny and Stewart and you, is that?
Yes.
I didn't really see that on Bandcamp, did I?
I think it's on the. I run a little label called Castor and Pollock's Music, and I think it's up on that because it's a collaborative label rather than me as a band leader. So I think if you type in Castor and Pollock's Music at bandcamp.com or .bandcamp, here, let me send it to you right
I
now.
got it. Is this your website? That's not, is it your website?
Castor and Pollock's Music.com, yes, is my website. And then if you go, yeah, if, well, okay, wait, go, what's the easiest way to find this? Yeah,
Audio?
yeah, click on audio. Okay, so then go, no, I think these all go to my page. Um,
Hey, man, you're pretty darn prolific.
uh,
Holy moly.
yeah, there's a few things up there. Um, if if you type in Castor and Pollock's Music.bandcamp.com, I think that'll take you there.
Uh,
Um,
uh,
yeah. Oh, try not bands. Try dot.
Maybe go to Bandcamp and then cast
Yeah, maybe go to
Pollux.
Bandcamp and see if you can get to.
Like,
Yeah, there we go. So Castor and Pollock's right there.
how do you spell Pollux?
Pollux. Music. No, yeah, it should be Castor and Pollock's Music, and then
Oh,
it'll pop up.
you're kidding.
This
There's something else with that name?
Uh, it was a really good idea when I was 17. Castor and Pollux are the two brightest stars in Gemini. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so there's a light that goes on automatically, and then there's the other the on the second line there's that next outpost. That's another record. That was actually recorded live in Ensenada, and then the most recent one is live in.
Can I hear a little bit of this? I
Oh yeah,
mean, this is
oh
40
yeah.
minutes, so I'm not going to hear it all. But I do want
We're listening to both tracks.
I want to hear a little bit of this.
Oh yeah,
I love Stewart too. I think he's great.
oh yeah. I'm a fan.
I know I could go on more, but
Oh
and
yes.
there might not be a spot where we can get out easily.
It's funny, the we did a duo, and the whole thing was like an hour and 10, and I was like, okay, that's good. We can put it on a CD, but then putting it up on Bandcamp, Bandcamp only allows a certain amount of megabytes to the track, and the track was so long, it was too long for Bandcamp. So we ended up, the my friend Rafter mastered it, and he said, okay, well, if we make it a FLAC, it'll make it a little bit smaller, which doesn't make any sense to me, that a high resolution file is smaller than a WAV file. So we ended up doing that. But yeah, the time limits are really interesting.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I played duo with Vinny, he said, you got to talk, and I don't like to stop. I was like, okay, like you have to do the introductions, and we're not stopping till the very end. I said, okay, here we go. So it's always a nice challenge to play with them.
Yeah, that's he does that at Kulaks. He does a set that lasts about an hour.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And what I find interesting is um I don't I'm not bored anytime within that hour. And I'm not sure why, because I have heard more avant-garde music that does bore me, and I'm not that knowledgeable about what's happening, but I do know that I find it very melodic what he does,
yeah.
um, the
And him
whole
and
thing.
and him and Stewart have a really, they've been playing together a long time. I've said this to Stewart a few times. Like harmonically, what they do is really interesting. There's a lot of of little things that happen, or little agreements, and really just beautiful little things. Even when it's very dense, there's
Yeah,
still a lot of just little things happening that I find really interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, he really manages to uh, just really push and keep that going. I think I've played with a lot of people over the years that do similar things, and it clearly, at some point, you're going to get bored, or you're going to run out of ideas, and he never seems to run out of ideas, which is one of the good challenges, because I run out of ideas, and I'm like, at some point, I just have nothing else to say. George Lewis was here at UCSD, the trombone player, and I took an improv class with him, and I remember him telling me, he said, it was this great, I just looked it up recently, I didn't realize what it was, but he said, the things that we don't know about, we pass over in silence. He was basically telling me, like, if you don't have anything to say, don't say it, which I thought was wonderful. And so I'm trying to find that line between, like, having something to say, and then also knowing when I don't have something to say, and getting out of the way and letting other people talk.
I know that feeling. So last week we had an experiment in a a basically an improvisation night at Kulak's.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Ellen Burr?
Oh yeah. I just saw Ellen at Oracle. I haven't seen her in
Oh,
years.
okay. Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah.
And so she led it, and it ended up being um, one, two, well, three singers basically. One left, and then another one came. So it was basically three singers,
Yeah.
and Ellen was on flute mostly. And we were doing games, like improvisation games and stuff.
And she has those cards, right?
She does, but this did not
Oh,
involve.
did not involve that. Okay.
Yeah, because when I interviewed her, we talked about those cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's very experienced in all that. And so yeah, and it was, I mean, I also have an improvisational group called Fish to Birds. We've been
Yeah.
singing together for 8 years, 9 years. And so, like what you're talking about, we've done it so long, and there are, you know, we'll, we won't rehearse, so to speak, but we'll get together and try stuff out.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we have these kind of agreements,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
that we
Yeah. I like
find
that.
work best.
Yeah.
And sometimes, man, it's just like the other night with Ellen. It was like my girlfriend and her were creating this stuff, and I just sat back, man, because it was just perfect how it was.
Oh
It was
yeah.
beautiful.
That's a beautiful moment when you
Yeah.
realize, like, okay, I'm here. I am. Um, And George actually said something really interesting where he said there's certain points where in an improv, like just the fact that he's there and he
Yeah,
tries to make people aware that like I'm here, I'm listening to you,
yeah.
I'm enjoying this, and I don't need to be part of this and keep going. That's a very mature thing, and that's a I've played with certain people who get weirded out when you stop playing. They think the piece ends or something. I'm like, no, no, what you're doing is so great. I don't need to be part of this. Please keep going. It's beautiful.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's another kind of layer.
yeah.
Kind of reminds me of something kind of unrelated, but somewhat related. I used to do this, um, this work, emotional work, where the person listening to me was only really allowed, they were not allowed to respond emotionally.
Oh,
They could
wow.
ask me something, but they were not, they, it was like, oh, you did what? No, nothing like that. It was like, okay,
Yeah,
was just listening. And the relief that I felt from that, you know, saying whatever I wanted to say, what I had done or whatever, and then having somebody just not be emotionally involved at all, but listening and
yeah,
there. That was extremely powerful. It made me weep sometimes, just that by itself. So I
yeah,
think musically, I think that's really important as well. Having somebody there, you know.
yeah, yeah. And supporting you. I mean, it's a challenge to how do you let those people know, that okay, I am not playing, I'm not actively participating, but I am actively participating just by being here and
Yeah,
by supporting you.
yeah,
And clearly that's kind of based on friendship, I think, and
yes.
experiences and knowing the people. Um, but I've had that same experience with people that I barely know. Stevie Richards, who's a pretty amazing saxophone player and synthesizer, lives in Australia, came up here. Um, Asked me to put on a gig. We just spoken a little bit on the internet, really didn't know each other. And I met him 10 minutes before the gig, rolled in, set up my drums, and we played this beautiful set that was very austere, a lot of space, like a lot of little sounds. Um, Never really got above a certain dynamic level that I think was mutually agreed upon. And we had a really amazing time. Um, and it ended, and I was thinking, okay, that was really amazing. We just a mutual respect, like a nice bond without really knowing each other. And so, like we were talking earlier about like how our music can change society and stuff. Like right there, I was like, okay, this is possible. And those moments are like definitely, what did Rasan say? Bright moments. Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. We do this pretty amazing stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, it's 2 hours.
We
I
did
just
it.
glanced at the time. It was like, really? Thought we had more time. Anyway, Nathan, thanks for giving me 2 hours of your precious
Thank
time.
you so much for having me. This is a wonderful chat, and there's several things you said I need to go back and ponder about, especially that what you were just saying about the emotional work. Like, yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. And I'm going to look forward to hearing a lot more of your music and and Rick Helzer, if you're listening, thanks for the connection.
Yes,
And
thank you, Rick.
yeah, um, just to tell people what's going on, the next few days will be archives. Um, Actually, me on an archive, and Bernie Dressel, Beverly Church Hogan, and Mary Foster Conklin. And um, if you're in Los Angeles, uh, Thursday night, tomorrow night, I'm going to be singing The Art of the Duo with Dave Moscow. So one aspect of my singing is, coming up with a great American songbook. And
Oh yeah.
I love duos. I probably have 7 duo recordings out of the 15 that I have. And this guy and I have played together for 35 years, and it's just really fun. I especially like doing the Great American Songbook with him because there's the forms are there, but we just do whatever we want.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
Like you said, that agreement, acknowledgement. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So we're gonna do that Thursday at Kulak's, and then Saturday at Kulak's is is a larger group. I thought it was going to be a duo, but it's not a duo, it's a trio. And Antonia Bennett, who's Tony Bennett's daughter.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and she's a very nice singer. And Todd Hunter is going to be on piano, and it's going to be really nice. So if you're in LA, that's what I'm involved with this week. And everybody have a great week. And this was a real inspirational conversation. So I hope you all got inspired.
I got inspired.
Me too.
Definitely.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
By the way, do you want to tell anyone where you are or what you're doing in the next
Oh my
week or two?
goodness. What's today? Wednesday? Um, the only thing I have this week, there's the Adams Avenue Unplugged. It's sort of a street festival, and there's multiple different things. And I'm playing with Verdell Smith, and he does. Um, I guess it's like if you heard the R&B singer D'Angelo playing reggae. It's a really interesting group, and he's great. He plays guitar, so we're playing that, and not even sure what else is coming up. We're into May. Oh my goodness, we are into May. I think those are the main things this week. We'll be
Okay.
playing Adams Avenue, and then we're playing a bar on Friday night. My website is woefully out of date, and I need to back that up and get those dates up there. I've been dealing with issues from my host, my server. So, but you can find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram at Firecliffs, Firecliffs, and Facebook. Most things are under Castor and Pollux Music. I'm on YouTube. We watched a couple of those videos, and then the Bandcamp. Those are all good links.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Have a great day. I hope your day is prolific.
Indeed. I hope everyone is.
Bye.